Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Brendon. I'm part of the AFK cast. You probably heard me and Sean talking in our previous podcast episodes. So today I'm doing a review of my own. I know you probably, or if you haven't seen, Shawnee did an episode of the first, or he did a review, sorry, of the first episode of DC's Doom Patrol. That's up on our YouTube channel, so you can go check that out. I'm going to be doing a review just in general of season 2 of Punisher. Sean hasn't watched it yet, so Sean, if you're watching, click away until you've watched it, because this is going to have spoilers. So I just figured I'd give this a shot. It is a little different because I'm actually recording this, so I might have trouble staring right at the camera, and if the quality's not the greatest, I do apologize. I will work on that. So just right out of the gate, I liked it. I thought it was really good. I definitely have some mixed emotions about it. I'm not going to say it was the best or the better of the two seasons. I definitely liked season 1 better just because, I don't know, it just carried more of a story personally. But season 2 overall, I mean, it was pretty good. It was a lot slower than season 1 was, and there were a lot of things that I wasn't really a big fan of. First and foremost, some things that I wasn't a big fan of. I didn't like the girl Amy personally. I just thought her whole plot and everything and her whole real purpose in the show was kind of annoying. Just because her character, they really tried to focus her on her character, in my opinion at least, of the whole, or being the whole, oh, she's just like an independent, girl. She doesn't need anybody, type of thing. But then there are so many different things where she's so childish and she's still a child, and it was just kind of annoying because it just seemed like she did nothing but really complain and just nag. But I mean, in the end, when she goes and her and Frank go on their own ways, it was sentimental. I thought it was good, but I mean, overall, I didn't really like her character. I thought she was kind of annoying and just more of like this baggage that Frank had to carry around. But that's just me personally, and I'm not trying to start fights with anybody. But um, yeah, I mean, she was good. And then I guess I'll just transition right into this. The main thing that everybody really keyed in on for the second season in general was Billy Russo as Jigsaw. A lot of people were not happy about that, just because they didn't like the minimal scarring done to his face, and I do have to agree. If you watched season 1 and you looked at everything that happened to him, I mean, he was just brutally, brutally beaten, and his face was drugged down a broken mirror, and was he got the shit beat out of him. There's no way around that. He had all this, damage done to his face and everything to come back and just have this very minimalistic scarring. I mean, still it was rough to look at, but not as rough as one would imagine. That I did agree with, but the angle they went with was more of a psychological angle. So not only was there physical scarring, but there was also a lot of mental scarring where he didn't really remember things, and in his mind, he still remembers Frank as his brother, his best friend, as his battle buddy and everything. I thought that angle was actually it was a lot more interesting, to be honest, instead of just Billy waking up, seeing his face, and remembering everything and being like, I'm gonna kill Frank. I think it added more to the story, of Billy remembering things and, trying to remember who he was. And then the scene where they're doing that, like, bank heist, and Frank has disguised himself as one of the vets who was working with him, and they're like, oh, you late or whatever. And, you just hear Frank, do the typical, Russo! And he takes off the jacket, and he's got, the bloodied, ballistic vest with the skull on it, and he takes off the mask, and Billy just freezes, and the camera work they do, it's like really blurred and distorted on the side, and then just Billy's face, he's just in complete, just speechless, just dismay almost. He's just completely frozen, and the guys are like, come on, we gotta go, because they did just rob a bank. I think that's very, I love the way they did that. I thought it was fantastic, and it did add more to their whole dynamic in the second season. I thought that was really interesting. Um, but the one thing I didn't like was how they killed off Russo. because everybody knew it was going to happen. I was expecting and I was really hoping for this massive shootout and this massive showdown between Frank and Billy, kind of something to the level, if not higher, than what season 1 ended on. I was really hoping for something like as dramatic and explosive as that. Not literally, but it was really boring. Because, what happens is Billy has this therapist that he's been working with in the hospital that he winds up falling in love with, and I'm going to cover that whole side plot thing in a minute, but basically what winds up happening is Madani finds out that Billy and the therapist, her name is Krista in the show, are working pretty much in love, working with one another, and Krista is playing this angle trying to figure out Madani and figure out Frank and try to, how to break them as individuals and find their weaknesses so Billy can then in turn use that as fuel for his fire. So they try really hard, to do that, and it works. But what winds up happening is Madani pretty much finds out she's over at Krista's apartment, and they get into this fight, and then Madani winds up pushing her out a window, and then she falls and she dies, and Billy's walking back to the apartment, and he has flowers in his hands, and he looks up and he sees Madani, so he goes into this berserker rage and races up there, and gets into this big fight with Madani, and Madani winds up shooting him in the chest 3 times, and then it's pretty much for like the last episode or so, or 2 episodes, it's just Billy dying pretty much, because he's been shot, the wounds are getting infected, and he's bleeding out, so he's just losing a lot of blood and everything. Well, what winds up happening is he calls Curtis, and he's like, hey man, I'm bleeding out in your basement, can you come help me? And so he's like, don't call the cops. And he goes, okay, I'm not going to call the cops. Well, who does he call? He calls Frank. So Frank walks in, and he comes in, and Billy sees him. He goes, figures he would call you. And he goes, well, Frank, whatever it is I did to you, I'm sorry. Well, he gets cut off because Frank just shoots him and kills him and walks away. I didn't really like how they did that, just because I feel like that's a really weak way to send off Billy, as in because of how strong of an individual he is and how capable of a fighter he is. They just send him off. He's pretty much already on death's door, and Frank just finishes him off and just walks away. I'm like, okay. But an interesting kind of parallel almost is in the first John Wick movie, when John Wick finally finds the kid who killed, broke into his house, beat him up and killed his dog and stole his car. He finds him. There's no time, he doesn't have this huge emotional dialogue scene or whatever. He just comes up, pop, blows the kid away, and then just leaves. So I do think it's kind of interesting how they did it, but I also am not a huge fan of it. But now, back to what I was saying before, the whole plot between Billy and his therapist, Krista. I wasn't really a huge fan of her, just because she kind of annoyed me. And I know it just seems like, oh, Brendon, you sick man, you have a problem with women. No, I don't have a problem with women. And I just don't like their characters. I mean, it could just be the way that, Amy was acted out. It could just be the way that Krista, the actress portrayed the character. I just personally didn't like their characters in the show, because it just seemed annoying, and they just kind of seemed like that. They just seemed a little unnecessary, in my opinion. Now, I wasn't a big fan of Krista's character, but I did like how she worked her angle to find out Frank's weakness, which, she gets from Madani just by talking to her casually, like, oh, I'm your friend, I'm a doctor, have some wine, whatever. I really liked how they did that, and how that played out. I thought it was actually really good, and it gave Billy that weakness of, hey, Frank always thinks he's this good guy and doesn't hurt innocent people, so Billy kills 3 innocent women, puts them in a room, and stages it to make it look like Frank killed 3 innocent women while trying to pursue Billy, and that just crushes Frank's morale. And when he's laying in the hospital bed, he's just like, I deserve to be here, I deserve this, I killed innocent people. But, I mean, overall, I didn't really like that whole plot. I kind of see why they did it because, again, Billy brought himself back up from nothing, built himself pretty much an empire, and then it all came crumbling down again. I get why they did it. I just wasn't really a huge fan of how that all really was. I mean, I don't know. I feel like they could have done away with it and built something else completely different, but it worked for the show. So, Madani, I think I liked her a lot better in the second season than I did the first season because you see the whole total difference from her in the first season where she's, just trying to be that good cop, just trying to do well, always wanting to do the right thing. And then it gets switched up to now she's just this I don't care, just kind of rambunctious cop. Sorry, my dog's here. Not really rambunctious. That was a bad way to go about it, but just this whole, her just entire, perspective on her career has just changed. She's like, I'm not going to play anymore. I'm not going to take shit from anybody anymore, She's almost become like the disgruntled veteran cop who's just so hard that, no matter what you do, you're not going to break the foundation of it. She's just like, I'm not letting this happen again. And she's almost kind of twisted in a way too because every single day she's going and visiting Billy and every single day she's there with him, seeing him, just trying to be that constant reminder of like, yeah, okay, Billy, I know this is a bullshit facade you've put on. I know you're faking this, when in reality he isn't. But I did like the way Madani was in the second season just because I feel like her character blooms more in the second season than the first one. So, yeah, Karen Page was in the second season, but not really she was there, like, towards the end, and, I mean, her character was the same as it was in Daredevil, as in, the first season of Punisher. It was good, I liked it, she, Deborah Ann Wall does a phenomenal job as playing Karen Page, and I really like the way she did her role, so, there's not really much to discuss on that. If you've seen Punisher Season 1, or if you've watched anything from Daredevil, any of the seasons, you can just tell how great of a job she does as the role of Karen Page. So, moving on, because I don't want to have this be like a super long review. I would have to, out of 10, I'd probably give it like a 7. I personally liked it. There were a lot of parts that were very flat, like I said earlier. Another thing was John Pilgrim, I believe his name was. His whole thing was kind of weird, and what I didn't like was how the show overall was balancing or kind of bouncing back and forth between the whole thing with Billy and then the whole thing with Amy being hunted down by the guy John, and that whole thing. I did like the way they ended the whole thing with John. Just as in Frank was about to kill him, but he's like, oh, don't let me, it's like, he said something about like his kids, and Frank has, instead of just being his typical brute self and he just murders everybody, he's just like, I don't care. It shows that Frank is actually human, and it kind of gives him almost a glimpse of himself, and it's kind of like Frank looking in a mirror like, hey, he's just doing this, just because of his family, whatever, just trying to help his family, and he lets the guy live and kind of helps the guy out by taking out the old couple. I think I really like that. I just like the good send-off they had. But I did not like how they were going back and forth between the two things, just because it leaves a lot of room to get confused, and it's just annoying trying to keep up with, like, oh, okay, John Pilgrim has killed off these people now, but then it's like, also Billy's doing this, so Frank's trying to do this and that and this and that. I don't like the bouncing back and forth. They should have just stuck to one thing and rolled with it, personally, I think. But then again, I can also understand why they did it, just because there's not really, if you just look at the whole Billy Russo plot line, there's not really much to go on. It's just Billy winds up breaking out of prison, kind of remembers who he is in some parts of his past, and then, recruits a bunch of veterans and starts a crime ring, and then Frank comes and stops him. It's like, there's not really much of a story there, so I see why they did it. But, so I'm probably going to wrap this up here, just because I don't want to keep rambling on. But like I said earlier, I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10 overall. Like a 6.5, 7 out of 10. I know I might have said 7.5, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's like a 6.57. It was good. I liked it. It had some pretty decent action sequences in it. Again, John Bernthal delivers a phenomenal performance as Frank Castle. Ben Barnes does a great job as Billy Russo. Amber Rose Riva, as Madani. They all did phenomenal jobs playing their roles again, like they did in the first season. I just feel as though that this second season, if I was glad they made a second season because I love season one, but I can understand why a lot of people are like, no, you don't need a second season, and this is kind of a good example of why. And I'm not saying don't go watch it; it's bad. It's not bad. It's good. I enjoyed it myself, but overall, I'd have to say that I feel like they could have done a better job, and there were a lot of things they could have done without. And so yeah, that's pretty much how I'm gonna wrap this up. I apologize if this is kind of a very vague review. This is new territory for me. I've never done a review before, so hopefully in the future when I record more of these, I have a better perspective, and I can record it a lot better. So yeah, on Saturday, which is tomorrow, if you're watching this video, we are going to be recording another podcast. We're going to be doing it a little bit different, and we're probably going to be covering the fact that Punisher and Jessica Jones got canceled by Netflix. That's just something I wanted to throw in there. So yeah, make sure to tune in and check that out. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are uploading our podcasts on something called Podbean, and I know as of yesterday, I believe, our podcast got approved by iTunes, so you can go on iTunes, look up AFK Allies, and if you want to listen to our podcasts there, you can. And don't forget our Twitch channel. We'll do some live streams and stuff there. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.